There's a powder sitting in a garden supply store near you right now that swells shut against water pressure the harder the water pushes against it. It costs about $1 for enough to seal most household leaks. It has been doing this exact job since before Rome had running water, quietly lining reservoirs and sealing cisterns across thousands of years of human civilization. Engineers in China used it to waterproof the Grand Canal. Builders in the Ottoman Empire packed it into the foundations of bathhouses that are still standing today. Plumbers in the early 20th century used it as a first resort, not a last resort, before industry decided it was more profitable to sell you a service call instead. They did not bury this because the powder stopped working. That is the part worth sitting with for a moment. They buried it because it kept working forever, got cheaper every decade, and could not be billed to your credit card at $300 an hour. Stay with me, because what happened to this powder in the last 50 years, and who specifically made sure you never heard its name, is the part that explains everything about your last plumbing bill. The global plumbing services market was worth roughly $500 billion in 2023. That is not a typo. $500 billion every single year, paid by homeowners and building managers to fix pipes, seal cracks, stop drips, and patch the slow, invisible damage that water does to structures over time. Inside that number, the waterproofing and sealant product segment alone, the sprays, the caulks, the epoxy compounds, the rubberized coatings, accounts for another $60 billion annually. And buried inside the research on what causes most of those repair calls is a detail that almost nobody reads past the first page. The majority of residential water leaks that result in a plumber visit are slow, low-pressure seeps through porous concrete, masonry joints, and pipe fittings. Not burst pipes, not catastrophic failures. Slow seeps, the kind of swelling powder has been stopping since the age of aqueducts. That powder cannot be patented. It comes out of the ground. You cannot trademark a clay deposit. You cannot build a subscription service around something that costs 70 cents a pound and lasts indefinitely in a sealed bag on a shelf. A $500 billion industry does not grow when the answer to most of its calls is already sitting in your garage. But stay here, because the science behind what this powder actually does when it touches water is more strange and more precise than anything in a hardware store bottle. And once you understand the mechanism, you will never look at a dripping joint the same way. I'm not going to tell you this is a new invention. The Egyptians packed this clay around the bases of stone cisterns 4,000 years ago. The Romans used it in layers beneath the floors of their public baths. Those baths that still hold water when it rains today, 2,000 years after the last Roman mason touched them. The Chinese engineers who built the Link Canal in 214 BC lined its banks with the same material and achieved a waterway, so watertight that sections of it still function. A German engineer named Hans Luft documented its use in early 20th century dam construction and noted, specifically, that it outperformed every synthetic compound available at the time under sustained hydrostatic pressure, which means pressure from water pushing against it from one side. The powder has a name. It is called bentonite. And the reason I just told you all of that history is not for decoration. The reason this works is something you have already seen today. Stay with me, and I will show you exactly where you have already watched this happen without knowing what you were looking at. You have seen this your whole life and just never connected the dots. You have watched a dry sponge sitting flat on a counter and then watched it double in size the second it hit water. You have pressed your palm into a bag of dried beans and felt them shift like sand and then come back 2 hours after they soaked and found a solid, packed mass. You have seen a cork swell in a wine bottle until it was nearly impossible to pull out. Bentonite does all three of those things simultaneously, and it does them specifically in response to water pressure. The harder the water pushes, the tighter the seal becomes. It is the only material on Earth that gets better at its job the more the problem tries to fight it. That is not poetry. That is the exact physical mechanism. And once you understand that a powder can swell to 15 times its dry size in a space no wider than a hairline crack, filling it completely, pressing against every wall, hardening into something that has the consistency of stiff rubber, you realize that what you have been paying $300 to fix is something $1 of powder in 20 minutes of your time can handle permanently. Most people who try this get one step wrong. It is the prep step. It is the very first thing, and it is the difference between a seal that holds for 20 years and a seal that washes out in a week. Here is what you need. I want to be honest with you about every number. Bentonite clay powder, the pure granular kind, not the kitty litter blend, not the pond liner tablet, just the straight powder. You can find it at any farm supply store, any garden center, and most hardware stores that carry drainage products. A 5-pound bag costs between $1 and $2 depending on where you live. For a single pipe joint or a crack in a basement wall, you will use about a handful. The 5-pound bag will last you through a dozen repairs. Dry Portland cement. The gray powder in the small box, not pre-mixed concrete. About $2.50 at any hardware store. Clean, dry sand, the kind sold for children's sandboxes or for mixing mortar. Under $2 for a small bag. You may already own this. A small plastic mixing tub or an old bucket you do not need back. A stiff bristled brush, a spray bottle filled with plain water, a clean rag or paper towels. That is genuinely it. Here is the one thing most people get wrong. They apply the powder or the mixture to a wet surface. What you see when this fails is a grayish paste that looks solid for the first hour, then slowly develops a dark line along one edge where water is still moving underneath. By day 2, there's a small bubble of moisture at the edge of the patch. By day 5, the whole thing is separated from the substrate and the leak is back, slightly worse than before because the surface was disturbed. That is what failure looks like. You will recognize it immediately. What success looks like is a patch that within the first 2 hours turns slightly darker at the edges, not the center. The edges are where the bentonite is swelling into contact with the surrounding material. The center stays dry because the seal has already formed underneath. By day 2, the edges are slightly raised, almost imperceptibly, because the clay has expanded into every micro gap it could find. You press on it, and it does not flex. It is already locked. The fix is this. The surface must be damp, not wet. Not dry, damp. Step 1. Stop the active flow first. If water is actively running through the crack, a visible trickle or a steady drip, you need to slow it before you seal it. Take a handful of dry bentonite powder and press it directly into the crack with your thumb. Hard. Hold it there for 30 seconds. The powder will begin absorbing the water immediately. You will feel it stiffen under your thumb. This is not the permanent repair. This is a temporary dam that buys you the 2 minutes you need to mix and apply the real seal. Think of it like pressing a cork into a bottle that is already full. You're not trying to make it perfect. You're just buying time. Step 2. Mix your sealing compound. In your bucket, combine 2 parts dry Portland cement, 1 part bentonite powder, and 1 part fine sand. Dry all 3 together until the color is uniform throughout. It will look like pale gray flour with a slightly gritty texture. Now add water from your spray bottle, just enough to bring the mix to the consistency of thick peanut butter, not wet peanut butter. The stiff kind, straight from the jar, that holds a shape when you scoop it. If it pours, it is too wet. Add more dry mix. If it crumbles when you press it, spray 2 or 3 more bursts of water and fold it in. You're looking for a material that holds the impression of your thumb when you press into it. That is the right consistency. Step 3. Prepare the surface. This is the step that determines everything. Use your stiff brush to scrub the area around the crack clean. Remove any loose material, any flaking concrete, any old caulk. You want to expose fresh, solid material on both sides of the leak. Then take your spray bottle and mist the area lightly. 1 pass. Just enough that if you pressed a dry paper towel to the surface, the towel would come away slightly damp but not wet. This moisture is critical. It gives the bentonite something to bond with chemically as it swells. A completely dry surface repels the initial bond. A soaking wet surface dilutes the mixture before it can set. Damp is the target. Damp is the entire secret. Pay close attention to what comes next because this is the step most people treat as optional, and it is the exact reason some repairs hold for decades, and others fail before the month is out. Step 4. Apply the compound in layers, not all at once. Take a portion of your mix about the size of a golf ball for most cracks. Press it firmly into the opening using your thumb and work it in with a circular motion. You're not spreading it like paint. You are packing it like you're stuffing something into a gap that does not want to accept it. Push hard enough that you feel resistance. The material should be flush with the surrounding surface or very slightly proud, meaning raised a hair above the surface. Do not try to make it flat and smooth. A slightly raised application gives the bentonite room to swell without cracking the outer face of the patch. If the crack is longer than about the width of your hand, work in sections. Pack 1 section, move to the next, then come back to the first and add a second thin layer over it. This 2-layer approach gives the first layer time to begin its initial set while you are working down the line. The first layer does not need to be perfect. Its job is to fill volume. The second layer's job is to seal the face. Step 5. Keep the patch damp for the first 24 hours. This sounds counterintuitive. You're sealing against water, but now you're adding water. Here is why this matters. Portland cement gains its strength through a chemical reaction that requires moisture. If it dries out too fast, that reaction stops early and the cement is brittle. The bentonite needs moisture to complete its swelling and lock into position. Spray the patch lightly every 2 or 3 hours on the first day. Just a mist, enough to keep the surface from drying out. On day 2, leave it alone completely. By day 3, the repair is set. The smart test for a finished repair does not require any equipment. Run your dry hand slowly across the patched surface. A surface that is sealed properly will feel slightly cool and uniformly solid. There will be no soft spots, no give, no areas that feel slightly damp when the surrounding surface is dry. If any section of the patch yields slightly under gentle pressure, press it firmly with your thumb. Add a small amount of fresh mix over that spot. Mist it once and leave it. It will catch up to the rest of the patch within a few hours. This test works better than any gauge or meter because your hand is more sensitive to temperature difference than any budget instrument you could buy. Now think about what you just built. One repair: a basement wall crack, a pipe joint, a seeping foundation corner, one handful of powder in 30 minutes of your afternoon. Total cost, about $1.50 counting the cement. Most people own the brush already. Most people own the bucket already. The spray bottle is the one purchase, and it costs less than $2. Now think about a house with 4 problem areas: basement wall, laundry room floor drain collar, the joint where the front garden hose bib enters the exterior wall, and the hairline crack in the garage floor that weeps when it rains hard. 4 repairs, $5 of materials, a Saturday morning. Now think about 10 houses on your street. The same 5 materials, bought in slightly larger quantities, cost perhaps $20 total for all 10 repairs. The saving on a single plumber call for one of those houses, the average residential plumber visit runs between $150 and $350 before parts, covers the material cost for the entire street 40 times over. The math does not need to be stated as math. You can feel it. A family managing a modest budget replaces 4 service calls a year with 4 Saturday mornings and a 5-pound bag of powder they bought once. That 5-pound bag costs less than $2 and will last them 3 years of normal household maintenance. No contractor scheduling, no 3-hour service windows, no invoice. No explaining the same problem to a stranger who is already calculating his hourly rate before he looks at the leak. No bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. One honest limit before you go try this: bentonite and Portland cement patching works on porous, mineral surfaces. Concrete, masonry, brick, stone, unglazed tile, and most cast iron pipe exteriors. It does not work on plastic pipe, PVC fittings, copper tubing, or flexible rubber connections. Those materials do not give the compound anything to bond into. On smooth plastic, the mix will sit on the surface and fall off. If your leak is at a plastic to metal joint, inside a visible PVC fitting, or along a copper supply line, this method is not the right tool. That repair needs a compression coupling or a solvent cement made specifically for that pipe material, both of which are still cheap, still available at any hardware store, and still far less expensive than a service call. Know your pipe material before you mix anything, and this method will never disappoint you. Ignore the material type, and you will misread the failure and blame the powder for a problem the powder was never designed to address. Somewhere in Turkey, a bathhouse wall that was sealed in the early 16th century is still holding water out of a foundation chamber that has never been excavated. Not because the builders were extraordinary, because the clay they packed into the joint 5 centuries ago has never stopped swelling. It is still pressing outward against the stone right now, while you are reading this, while the city moves around it, while the seasons change above it. Somewhere in rural China, a stretch of the Linkou Canal that was lined with this same material during the Qin dynasty is still channeling water along the route it was set to follow more than 2,000 years ago. The powder did that. The mineral did that. The chemistry that costs $1 at a farm supply store did that. Your basement wall will do the same. The knowledge was always there. It was just waiting in a bag on a shelf while the industry sent you an invoice. I do not know what brought you here. Maybe a dripping pipe. Maybe a water stain on a ceiling that appeared last winter and never fully went away. Maybe just the sense that the answer to something this common should not cost what they have been charging you for it. It does not matter. The powder works either way.